One of my favorite arcade games to play is pinball. Now, I don't have a pinball machine at my home, but the beauty of having a 3D printer and a very limited knowledge of Fusion 360 is that I can make my own homemade version. Taking on a project like this is a perfect challenge for me because I've been wanting to learn how to 3D print and design much more complicated things. And after roughly 2 months of planning and designing, and even a version 1, my plans are at a point where it can actually make something really cool. So let's get into it. I first want to make a one-to-one blueprint of the machine on paper so that I have a reference when sketching it out on the computer. This is going to be a tabletop pinball machine, and it's going to completely run off of rubber bands. Here's the final blueprint ready, with most of its measurements right there on the paper. Let me give you a closer look. Here's the tunnel where the ball will get slingshot into the playfield, and these are the flippers. There are 4 paths the player can aim for. This path will take the ball around the back and up a ramp. This path here is how the player gets a multi-ball. This path will take you up a ramp, and the ball will meander back to the flippers. And finally, this path will take the ball to the initial starting area, the same place where you first launch the ball to when you start the game. Here, I printed out a test print of the flipper mechanism. My version 1 pinball machine was a failure, all because of the flippers. When I pushed in the paddle, it would get stuck, and it would also twist out of line. So a quick test print is necessary to make sure all those problems are fixed in the version 2. When printing, I realized this wall would be an obstruction, so I just quickly cut it out, and then I assembled all the parts. After that success, I made this final version, which you see on the screen now, which will be glued on the bottom of the wooden board. I did one small redesign here, which is this part. This will keep the flipper aligned when it's pushed really hard. I noticed that the flipper is pretty weak and will break under little stress, so I also made sure to fix that problem in the redesign. So the flippers are ready to print. Something really useful I learned when 3D modeling is organizing all the parts. I split up the playfield into the walls and the roof pieces, which are going to be different colors when they're printed, and at a click of a button I could hide them, which really saved time when 3D modeling the entire playfield. So this is the first print done. All of these 3D printed parts are for the flippers. The only problem I ran into when printing is messing with the tolerances. I made this one too tight, so it would not fit in the part, and I ultimately had to reprint this piece. I printed out all the white parts. Here's where I could start to see the outline of the machine coming to life. Then I printed the walls, which are going to be in this black accent color, as well as these pins, which will be really important for making the aisles and the bumpers, and I'll explain what those are later on. After 2 days of making my 3D printer run non-stop, I got all the pieces printed out. So this is what the machine is going to roughly look like. I haven't glued anything down yet, but it's nice to see how all the parts are going to fit together. This blue part makes up most of the pinball machine, so I'm going to glue this path together first. This part also holds the multi-ball, and it was pretty tricky to put together. The walls of the multi-ball have to house 3 balls and have to hold them in place. If it's too tight, the balls will get stuck, but if it's too wide, they will just roll through. So I had to be really precise on my placement. Here is where the first ball will jut out and will be the target the player is aiming for. And after gluing and some sanding on this corner, I think I got it working pretty well. You can see how the balls just roll into place. So that path is done. Next, I'm going to attach this ramp into the slide. The slide will meander the ball and feed it into the flipper. Since the slide was so long, I had to split them up into parts to fit on my 3D printer. So after gluing everything together, it looks like this. Next, I'm going to put in the aisles or lanes of what I call the lobby area. And in between them, I will put a rubber band. Now there's 3 lanes on my pinball machine, and they're designed to spit the ball in a certain location. Lane 1 will push the ball to the right, lane 2 is a straight down drop into the flippers, and lane 3 will give the ball the chance to fall either way. Before I glue this piece on, I want to first install all the black walls, as well as some of the bumpers. These bumpers are designed to bounce the ball in a random direction and will add a little chaos to the gameplay. Here I'm marking and gluing on the inner walls, and I made sure to leave enough room for the slingshot lane. Sometimes I don't even need glue and I can just connect the pieces together. This is really good for just saving some materials and making the build much simpler to put together. Next, I thought it was important to mark out where the flippers will go and put in the spacing for the feeder lanes into the flippers. I printed out multicolored parts to make the flipper look really cool and give it that much more classic pinball look. After adjusting, I glued down the blue walls. Here are some just quick tests to make sure the ball can fit through each lane. Seems it's working well. I'm gonna have to drill some holes for the flippers, which is why it's so important to mark out where they go. After drilling and a lot of sanding, I got the holes to look like this, so everything should be ready for me to assemble the flippers. I first added a washer so there's less friction of the 3D print rubbing against the wood. And with some outlines, I put on the housing and eventually installed the arm that you push to move the flipper. I made sure there was nothing getting stuck, and then I put on the rubber bands. I intentionally kept this part open so that in case the rubber band breaks from a lot of use, I can easily replace it with a new one. So all I need to do for this side is just to glue on the flipper. With one side functional, I immediately turned my attention to the other side and repeated the entire process again, starting with gluing that washer on and starting the assembly process again. This side's pretty similar, but the arm is going to be slightly longer because it has to cover the distance of the slingshot lane poking out on the edge there. After putting on this side's rubber bands and the flipper, we now have a somewhat functional pinball machine. It's just looking pretty boring to play, so let's add obstacles to the playfield. I first prepped the slides. This is the first one that goes over the slingshot lane, and this is the second one, which would connect to the flippers. The part I'm building now is one of the walls of the feeder lanes into the flippers, and I'm using simple rubber bands to make the balls bounce whenever they're hit. I started putting in the posts for the individual feeder lanes found near the flippers. These posts were probably my biggest blunder because I did not use screws to keep them attached to the board, and over time the rubber bands has been tugging on the posts and sometimes breaking them. So if I do a redesign of this machine, I would definitely make these screw into the playfield for much stronger results. I'm now just finishing and gluing in the feeder lanes. Next, I'm going to add more of these bumpers. They're just one of these normal posts, but they have a triple wrapped rubber band in the center of the post. And I put these in every corner so that the balls will bounce instead of just losing all their speed and dropping back down. I'm now finally installing this large blue section of the playfield, and I installed a rubber band in the back here so that when you slingshot the ball up, it will bounce off the side, which should hopefully add more randomness to what lane the ball will go through. I made some more bumpers and I put those in as well. I quickly designed the parts for the pullback launcher and put it on the machine. I put on this final piece here, as well as attaching the legs, which angles the pinball machine at about 6 degrees down. Now there are just some very minor fixes I need to add. One of those is preventing the flippers from getting stuck like this. I'm just going to be adding a small buffer. This will limit the range of motion of the flipper, but I made sure that the player can still cradle the ball like this. Another important part was making a one-way gate so that the ball will not roll back down the slingshot chute. I first made a replica out of Lego, and then I designed and printed the final version. I tried to make this gate as simple as possible, and something that I can just easily glue on top of the existing structure. Finally, I'm going to add a larger bumper in the middle. This will deflect the ball if it goes through that third lane. I guess this would also act as the pop bumpers on the pinball machine, but just very simplified. I want to also add some extra gameplay elements to my pinball machine. Since it's hard to track points like what a normal pinball machine does, the goal of my machine is to free all 5 balls that are placed around the playfield. By gluing on these 2 magnet strips, I can place 2 of them on both slides so that the slides aren't completely useless and actually have a role in how you win the game. 3 balls will go into the multi-shot part of the pinball machine, and the rest will be placed on the magnets. Finally, I decided to remove this bumper because it kept hitting the ball straight into the outside lane, which would end the game. And that was the last change I made, which means I can finally start playtesting. To keep it challenging, I have to free all 5 balls within 3 turns. Can I win my own game? Let's see. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you like the switch up in content. I've been really wanting to 3D print more, and I plan to incorporate my 3D prints into my roller coaster models in the future.